What if I told you that the entire global economy is standing on the edge of a single miscalculation? One wrong move, one misunderstood signal, and suddenly 20% of the world's oil supply could disappear overnight. This isn't a movie. This is happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz. And at this very moment, the United Nations Security Council is being pushed toward a decision that could either stabilize the situation or ignite something far bigger. Stay with me because this story is moving fast. Welcome to Geopulse News, where we break down the world's most critical geopolitical conflicts so you actually understand what's happening and why it matters to you. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because stories like this don't wait. Let's start with the basics. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most important choke points on Earth. At its narrowest, it's just about 21 miles wide, but through that narrow stretch flows nearly 17 million barrels of oil every single day. That's oil heading to Asia, Europe, the United States, basically every major economy on the planet. Now imagine that flow suddenly stops. That's the risk we're looking at right now. Over the past few weeks, tensions in the region have escalated dramatically. Iranian naval forces have been conducting aggressive maneuvers near commercial shipping lanes. Oil tankers have been shadowed, approached, and in some cases, temporarily seized. Crews were released. Ships were allowed to continue, but the message was clear: Iran is signaling power in the most economically sensitive location on Earth. But here's where it gets complicated. Iran didn't just wake up and decide to do this. This is happening in the context of growing pressure from the West, especially the United States, including economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and ongoing security tensions. Iranian officials have repeatedly warned, if we are pushed into a corner, we have the ability to respond. And right now it looks like they're demonstrating exactly that. In response, the U.S. has increased its military presence in the region. The United States Fifth Fleet has deployed additional warships, stepped up patrols, and is actively monitoring Iranian movements. At the same time, countries like the UK, France, and Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, are moving assets into position. Now you have multiple heavily armed forces operating in extremely close proximity. And this is where things become dangerous, because history shows us when tensions are high and militaries are this close, mistakes happen, miscommunication happens, and sometimes that's all it takes to start something much bigger. Now the focus shifts to the United Nations. An emergency session of the Security Council was triggered after a major incident. An oil tanker traveling from Saudi Arabia to South Korea was boarded by Iranian forces in international waters. The crew was held for hours. Part of the cargo was reportedly offloaded. That wasn't just a warning, that was a message to the world. The reaction was immediate. South Korea responded. The European Union condemned the action, and the United States called for a resolution that could authorize military force to protect shipping routes. But passing that resolution is far from simple. Inside the Security Council, there are 5 permanent members: the US, UK, France, China, and Russia. The US, UK, and France are pushing for action. But China and Russia? They have very different interests. China is one of Iran's largest oil customers. Russia has strategic ties with Iran and often opposes Western military interventions. And here's the key. If either China or Russia uses their veto power, the resolution fails. That leaves a critical question: what happens next? Do Western nations act alone? Because if they do, the risk level rises significantly. Let's talk about what a military operation would actually look like. Most likely it wouldn't start as a full-scale war. Instead, it would begin with something called a maritime security corridor, essentially military escorts for commercial ships. We've seen this before. During the 1980s, in a mission known as the Operation Earnest Will, the U.S. escorted oil tankers through the Gulf. It worked, but not without incidents that nearly escalated into war. But today's situation is very different. Iran's military capabilities are far more advanced. They now have anti-ship missiles capable of hitting targets hundreds of kilometers away, fast attack boats designed to swarm larger vessels, submarines operating in the Gulf, and missile systems positioned along their coastline. Any military force entering the strait would be operating under constant threat. Now, could the US and its allies handle that threat? Probably, but that's not the real question. The real question is, what happens next? What happens if a missile hits a warship? What happens if airstrikes begin? At what point does a limited operation turn into a full-scale regional war? And then there's the economic side. Oil markets are already reacting. Prices have jumped sharply in recent weeks. Some analysts warn that if the strait were fully closed, oil could spike above $150 per barrel. That would send shockwaves across the global economy. Fuel prices surge, supply chains break. Inflation rises worldwide. This isn't just a regional issue, this affects everyone. Now here's something important. Some analysts believe Iran isn't actually trying to start a war. Instead, this may be a strategy of brinkmanship. Push tensions to the edge, create economic pressure, and force negotiations on better terms. It's risky, but it's not irrational. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, diplomacy may still be active. There are reports of indirect communication channels, often through Oman, being used to pass messages between Iran and the United States. These back-channel talks have existed for decades. The question is, are they working this time? At the same time, regional players are watching closely. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar depend heavily on the strait for their own oil exports. They want stability, but they also want Iran's actions contained, and they know that a full-scale war could spill into their own territory. And then there's another layer to this conflict: proxy forces. Iran has influence across the region, in places like Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. Groups like the Houthis have already demonstrated their ability to target oil infrastructure. If a conflict begins, it may not stay contained to the strait. It could expand across multiple fronts, and we cannot ignore Israel. Israel views Iran as a direct threat. In any scenario where tensions escalate, Israel's actions could become a major factor. Would they stay out, or would they act? That's a question with serious implications. Right now, everything comes down to the next few days. The Security Council vote, diplomatic negotiations, military positioning, all of it matters. Because this situation is not just tense, it's volatile. And here's the reality: even if a resolution is passed, even if tensions cool down temporarily, the underlying issues remain. Sanctions, regional power struggles, nuclear concerns. These problems have been building for years, and they're not going away anytime soon. The people most affected by this won't be politicians. They'll be everyday people, families dealing with rising fuel prices, workers affected by economic shocks, and those living in regions where conflict could become reality. We're going to keep tracking this story closely, because in situations like this, being informed isn't optional. It matters. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening, let me know in the comments. Do you think the UN will pass the resolution? Should military force be used? Or is diplomacy still the best path forward? And if you found this valuable, share it with someone who needs the full picture, not just headlines. Stay sharp.